Right. Good evening, everyone. My name's Ross Anderson, and I work at Metrolinx. I'm a senior advisor on the Ontario Line Community Engagement Team. I'd like to warmly welcome everyone this evening, where we will provide an overview of current and future construction activities at the future Osgood Station at the intersection of University Avenue and Queen Street West. Next slide, please. Before we begin, let us take a moment to acknowledge we are on lands that have been and continue to be home to many Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, as immigrants, or involuntarily as part of the transatlantic slave trade in this generation or in generations past. We acknowledge the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work toward meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on territories and lands covered by many treaties that affirm and value the rights of Indigenous communities, nations, and peoples. We understand the importance of working toward reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. At Metrolinx, we'll conduct business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Next slide, please. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's meeting. And my goal this evening is to make sure the meeting stays on time and to make sure that all of your questions are answered to the best of our ability. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and it will be made available on the Metrolinx YouTube channel. There's also a closed caption feature available to which can be enabled on your device. This evening, as you see on the screen here, I'll be joined by my colleagues at Metrolinx and the construction team that's building the subway. So I would like to warmly welcome everybody who's joined tonight. Thank you. I'm going to be joined by James Francis, who works at Metrolinx as a subway sponsor. You see him waving on screen here. And then along with some members from our construction team, we have Juan Mendez Preciado, we have Francisco Metcalf, and we have Sarah Segton. You'll hear from each one of those people tonight. I would also like to welcome elected officials who may be joining us tonight or their staff. I believe we saw MPP Glover's registration for this event tonight and MP Kevin Vong. So welcome if you're here tonight as well. And if I have missed anybody, we welcome you as well tonight. I'd also like to warmly welcome the residents of 168 Simcoe Street, whom I had the pleasure of meeting with last week to discuss the construction activities happening on the south portion of the Osgood Station entrance, where you can see construction happening at the former CIBC building. Next slide, please. So tonight's agenda will consist of a number of topics related to piling and the construction that's coming to Osgood Station. So we do have an Ontario Line overview, followed by what progress has been made to date. We do have a construction look ahead, and then we get into the meat and potatoes of the meeting, the piling construction and what it's all about, followed by reducing impacts. And of course, we leave ample time after the presentation for question and answers. On the right of the screen here, we have a little bit of reminders for meeting guidelines. We want to keep this a safe space and respectful space for both you and the panelists. Well, we really encourage engagement and a productive conversation this evening. So once we get to the Q&A portion, there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand and ask your question. Otherwise, there is a chat function you can use as well. We're going to ask you to ask one question at a time. You may have an opportunity for a follow-up, but we want to give everybody an opportunity to ask their question. There are no bad questions, so feel free to ask whatever you'd like. And for other topics, we can also discuss this over the phone following the meeting. You can connect with us directly, and we're always happy to have a separate meeting with you following this evening. Next slide, please. So in advance of tonight's meeting, several questions have also been received using the Slido feature. So this is where people were able to ask their questions online in the days and weeks prior, and we were able to gather questions in preparation for tonight's meeting. If you submitted a question and you don't see that question on Slido this evening, it's because somebody already asked the same kind of question. This feature will remain open through this presentation. So as the constructor is speaking or as I'm speaking and a question pops into your head, you can easily go into Slido and ask that question. Otherwise, you can save it until we open the chat function, or you can ask it by raising your hand and using your microphone. I will have to enable your microphone in order for you to speak. And then you're going to have to follow these steps on your screen here to click unmute, which you see in the bottom right portion where the green square is around the microphone. Next slide, please. And here as well, you can use a QR code and scan your phone if you choose to use this function to ask your Slido question. Or you can enter the code here on the bottom left where it says 7844118. Next question, next slide rather. All right, the Ontario line. Next slide, please. Well, you've probably heard of it. That's why you're here this evening. And if you haven't, we welcome to share much information about it. But it's a new transit project that's being built in the city of Toronto. And it's designed to bring relief to the existing transit options in the city. As you can see, there'll be 15 different stops, 15 different stations, and it will be both an above ground and a below ground subway line. The portion we're going to focus on tonight is Osgoode. And what's special about this Osgoode station is that it's what we call an interchange station. Now, an interchange station is a station that can connect with the existing TTC line. In other words, it makes it very easily able for you to get off one subway and go up to a different platform and catch the TTC line 1. So you'll be able to really get to Union Station. You can go up to Bloor and you can catch the line 2 as well. And you can also continue to ride through the Ontario line. During rush hour, the Ontario line will be as frequent as every 90 seconds. And as you can see here, some other stats, so be able to take cars off the road. It will create jobs and more accessibility for folks that don't have very good access to transit. It'll bring relief to existing streetcars and existing subways. And it'll just make the lives of everyday people and everybody that's visiting Toronto just a little bit more easier. Next slide, please. The Ontario line is being delivered by several different contracts, and today we'll introduce you to Ontario Transit Group. Ontario Transit Group is delivering the south segment of the project in the highlighted portion you see here. So from Exhibition to Corktown is the responsibility of Ontario Transit Group, or OTG. OTG will be building the stations, and they'll be building the tunneling from Exhibition toward Corktown. As I'd mentioned, there's 2 very important interchange stations. So we have one here at Osgoode, but then we have another one at Queen Station. That's going to be just next to Osgoode Station, where you can, again, catch the TTC line 1, just where the Eaton Centre entrance is, and then easily get to Union Station. And the point of the Ontario line is to connect a whole network of transit options in the city. You'll be able to catch a GO train from Exhibition, or you'll be able to get off a TTC streetcar, or you'll be able to catch East Harbor and continue off to Lakeshore East. And with this in mind, again, Science Center to catch Eglinton. So with this in mind, we're trying to make it easy for people to get where they need to be and make the best use of everybody's times while giving congestion some relief in downtown core. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to hand it over to one of my colleagues at James Francis rather. James Francis is coming up next to speak. So thank you for listening to me. I'll ask you to go to the next slide, and James, it's over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Ross. So as Ross mentioned, Osgoode Station is one of the 7 stations that Ontario Transit Group, or OTG, is working to deliver. So as Ross mentioned off the top of the presentation, I'm with the sponsor team here at Metrolinx, providing oversight for the overall project, and I'll give a bit of an overview of Osgoode Station and some of the work we've been doing in terms of heritage preservation at the station, and then hand it over to OTG to dive into a bit more details about upcoming construction. So Osgoode Station is anticipated to be one of the busiest stations on the Ontario line. As Ross mentioned, Osgoode Station will be integrating with the existing TTC Line 1 Osgoode Station, so really contributing to that network effect that Ontario Line delivers from tip to tail, from Exhibition to Don Melvin Eglinton. We have 2 new entrances being built at Osgoode Station, accessible entrances. They're being built to accommodate the anticipated passenger volumes. One is at the northeast corner of Queen and University. You can see that on the figure. It's the white box shown there. The other station entrance is at the southwest corner of Queen and Simcoe. That's the white black outline box at Queen and Simcoe. And both of those new station entrances are located close to existing streetcar stops. And they also bookend the western and eastern limits of the new Ontario Line station, which is shown in the gray that's outlined in black on that slide. Next slide, please. In terms of heritage preservation, so Metrolinx, we very much recognize the significant heritage properties at and adjacent to and also near the Ontario Line station here at Osgoode. And we've been working diligently to preserve heritage structures at this location for their appreciation by future transit users, for area residents, and for passersby. And the existing heritage building at the southwest corner of Queen and Simcoe, which is shown on this slide, it's being preserved for use as a future station entrance building. The north facade, which is along the south side of Queen Street, is going to be retained in place throughout construction. And so you can see on this slide, kind of the right portion of the slide, those are yellow retention towers that will be retaining that facade in place throughout construction. The east facade along the west side of Simcoe Street, since this photo was taken, it's been removed in one piece, and it's being stored for the duration of construction to allow for access to the site for construction, and will be replaced very carefully following construction. At the North Station entrance, northeast corner of Queen and University, we've been carefully removing and storing offsite heritage elements, including portions of the iron fence and the cobblestone walkway. They'll be remaining in offsite storage for the duration of construction and reinstated post-construction. We've also removed similarly the South African War Memorial, which is also being stored offsite safely for the duration of construction. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Juan at OTG to speak a bit more about Osgoode Station construction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Mendez. I'm the Deputy Station Manager for Osgoode, and I'm going to give you a high-level schedule on the next works to come. So now, as James was saying, we've finished the heritage works, and we'll be securing the sites, erecting hoarding and doing some site preparations. In the north shaft area, will be diverting the traffic, so University Avenue northbound will be one of the lanes will be shifted into the median. That will allow some extra space needed for the shaft construction. And following to that, or in parallel in the south shaft, will be starting the piling probably sometime in May. That would then take us to the piling on the north later, and by the end of the year, during fall or winter, will be, once the piling is completed, we'll be doing the excavation of both shafts. Next slide, please. So now I'll try to give you a high-level view of what piling is. So next slide. Piling is a foundational technique. It's used all over the world in urban areas to basically lower the loads from the surface to a competent surface, in this case the bedrock, that it's here around 18 meters deep for us. And the main benefit of it is that it provides a lot of stability, support, and settlement reduction to the nearby infrastructures. So it's a perfect foundation technique for urban environments. How it works, basically it's drilling vertical holes, one next to each other, and all of them together form a wall, what we call the secant wall. Next slide, please. And basically we call it a secant wall, as you can see in the drawing, because these piles interlock one with each other. That's mainly to provide water tightness and a more stiff structure, because if we wouldn't interlock them, we would have very weak positions where the joints between them are. They are drilled normally in a hit and miss process because not all the piles are the same. We have what we call primaries and secondaries, or males and females. And the difference between them is that one of them are reinforced with a steel to provide more stiffness to the system, and others are simply a hole filled with concrete. The process of a hit and miss is because we need to drill first the piles that are unreinforced, because once the pile is reinforced, you cannot bite into it with the adjacent pile to provide this interlock that is needed. Next slide, please. So you can see here a very good image of how a secant wall looks, and you can see the piles interlocked ones with each other. You see as well some struts, which is part of the support of excavation that happens after. Once you start excavating, we need to install these struts or horizontal probes to provide more stiffness to the system. And you can see as well how reinforced piles and filler piles, or primaries and secondaries, are constructed in this section drawing that you see on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. So we can see here a diagram of the south shaft. So we see Queen Street and Cinco Street and how our shaft is going to look like. The portion of drawing that you see in brown is where our piles are going to be installed, and the yellow shaded routes are our logistics access and egress routes for the vehicles. So it's a pretty constrained site, but regardless of that, it's enough space for carrying out safely the piling operations. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So in terms of a schedule, we're looking at starting the piling in the south shaft around May. Um, then after that, we'll be piling in the north at some point. Works in the south are planned from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., so day shift only. And potentially we may need some weekend or extended hours here and there. Next slide, please. So what the community would be expecting from the piling. So the piling is a relatively low vibration excavation technique, but it's quite noisy at some points. How the pile is constructed, and what you can see there in the image is the hole is drilled with a caisson, which is the caisson is that rusty steel cylinder that you see there. So the caisson is installed down, pushed into the ground, and then an auger that is inside that caisson takes the ground out. When the ground comes out and the auger needs to move to release that ground and clear it to be able to go back in again, that can be a pretty loud noise. But apart from that, that moment where the auger is clean is not that noisy. The ancillary equipment that is used for this is excavators for loading that soil that is coming out of the excavation, concrete trucks to fill the piles once they are excavated. So we'll have some lorries in and out every day with Macaway with concrete, and we'll have flaggers in the gates controlling the traffic. Next slide, please. So reducing impacts to community and traffic arrangements that we'll see in our both shafts, north and south. In the south shaft, what you see there, hatch is the construction area, and in brown niche is the logistic area. So Simcoe southbound is west side lane will be closed and part of our construction site, but both Queen Street sidewalks, eastbound and westbound, will remain open. And similarly, in Simcoe, we'll have the south part of Simcoe westbound open as a sidewalk, and the eastbound will be open all the way to connect Queen and Richmond. So we're essentially just closing one lane of Simcoe. Next slide, please. In the north shaft, what we'll be doing, as I was mentioning, is closing or moving one of the lanes into the median, and that will provide the extra space that is needed for the shaft to be constructed in the existing sidewalk. So there would be a transfer of a lane, and cyclists and pedestrians will remain being able to go up North University Avenue, but shifted into the current northbound lane. So this is it from me. I hope you like it. I'm gonna pass it to my colleague Francisco Metcalf. He's gonna focus on noise and vibration. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Juan. My name is Francisco Metcalf. I am with OTG, and I'm the environmental manager for the contractor. So let's talk about reducing impacts a little bit. We understand that construction can be disruptive, and it can be messy at sometimes, but we have thought this out and came up with opportunities to reduce those impacts or eliminate them or manage them better. So in the sense of reducing impacts and mitigations, I wanted to take this slide to talk a little bit about dust. Okay, so with construction, there is inherent land disturbance that can produce some dust particles becoming airborne. So our first approach will be to prevent that from happening, and that the most common method to do that will be the use of dust suppression with water, right? But we will continue to monitor the area to make sure that our air emissions are within acceptable limits. And for that, we have or will be deploying air quality monitoring devices throughout the project area. Now, these devices are operating continuously and providing data through their telemetry capability. So we have at all times a good sense of what the air quality is, and if there are any reasons where we are approaching a threshold, we will get alarms that will tell us, and we can now investigate and change something if we're reaching those thresholds. Other mitigations that we are implementing include hoarding, where hoarding will also provide noise reduction, right? It's going to be functioning as well as a temporary noise barrier and provide a reduction in decibels that will keep our activities within acceptable limits. As Juan alluded in earlier slides, also, we have a very specific construction traffic setup for the area, right? So we will have a one-way traffic system with a entry point and an exit point. And the idea here is that since we're going to have trucks coming in to deliver different types of products needed for the construction activity, we are minimizing or reducing the need for those trucks to back up, right? And that's going to help with the noise. Also, construction equipment that will be operating in the site are going to be equipped with white noise backup alarms and reduce that annoying backup alarm noises that are typically tied to construction activities. And then also at our entry and exit points, we will have construction entrances and sweepers at the ready to do some cleanup in case there is some mud tracking onto the paved surface. We want to make sure that we're cleaning up and preventing any of that sediment going into catch basins, for example. The next slide, please. So with noise, we are also taking a similar approach as to what I described earlier with air quality. Okay, so for noise purposes, we will be having or have already operational some noise monitoring stations. These noise monitoring stations are capturing noise data continuously and are also equipped with telemetry capabilities. So similarly with air quality, When we are approaching a threshold limit, we will get automatic notifications to the project team, alerting us that we are getting ready to reach a threshold. So that will give us the opportunity to investigate, go back to the project area, and understand what's happening and tweak our means and methods as necessary to keep our noise emissions within acceptable limits. And I also alluded a little bit earlier on the fact that hoarding will be acting also as temporary noise barriers to also produce some decibels insertion loss and less impact from noise. In the picture on the right, you can see what a typical noise monitoring station looks like, and you will be seeing those deployed throughout the work areas. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take the opportunity a little bit here to use this slide to talk about what zone of influence is, right? And when we talk about zones of influence, that's basically the area within the work adjacent to or near proximity of it that may have potential impacts related to the activities that we're undertaking, like, for example, vibration or settlement. Now, a zone of influence is not as simple to calculate and delineate the boundaries. And I say that because it's not always the same setback measured from your construction activity. It takes into account other factors. So at the same location, depending on the feature of work that you're undertaking, the zone of influence may look different. For example, for our purposes here today, we're talking about vibration zone of influence in the context of a specific feature of work, in this case, piling operations, right? And to calculate that, we use different inputs, such as equipment to be used, right? The runtime of the equipment, the spatial distribution of that equipment. But maybe at the exact same location in the future, there could be a different feature of work which uses different type of equipment, different run times. It's located at different distances from different receptors, and that zone of influence will be looking different than what you're seeing today specific to piling. Now, as similarly to air quality and noise, we do have vibration instruments or monitoring stations deployed, and they also equipped with telemetry capabilities to give us a real-time information and advanced notice on alarms if we're going to if we're setting a trend that we're reaching a threshold, so that it'll give us enough time to huddle back with the project team, understand what's happening, and tweak means and methods as needed. That pretty much sums up a very high level description of what a zone of influence is, and I'll hand it back to Metrolinx for the future slides.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Juan, and thank you, James. Everybody, I know that was quite a bit of information at once, and it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. So I just want to take an opportunity now to ask some questions to the folks who just spoke. I'll ask if we can go to the next slide, please. Back ones there, thank you. So reminder here, this is how you use the function to raise your hand. How I'm going to be taking questions is I'm going to perhaps take a question from someone whose hand's raised and then alternate between the Slido function and then the chat function. My colleagues are going to open the chat function for you momentarily, and I see some hands are already being raised. So I ask my colleagues to open the chat function now, and in the meantime, I will get to some questions. Let me see whose hands are raised, beginning with Liz Driver. And before you ask your questions, please identify yourselves, and we'd love to know who we're speaking to. Liz, I've allowed your microphone, so mute yourself and please ask your question.
Oh, great. Okay. The most alarming thing that I've heard in this presentation so far is that the zones of influence will vary according to different conditions that OTG identifies. This is very difficult for individual owners or tenants of buildings or the public at large to understand what to actually be reassured that OTG is doing everything it should do to prevent vibrations to buildings. So my question is, will OTG ensure that every heritage building in proximity to its 2 construction sites has a vibration monitor? And it not for within or without changing zones of influence, but based on the value, the historical value of the building, the vulnerability of the building, and there's a whole host of factors that need to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Liz. And I'm going to ask Francisco to answer that. And Francisco, Liz's question was whether heritage buildings, regardless of being inside the zone of influence or outside, but in proximity to the construction happening at Osgoode, will they be given vibration monitors? And before we answer this, Liz, I know you had a conversation with our manager earlier today, Mark, who explained this in more detail to you. But from an engineering background and a scientific background, Francisco, perhaps you can add some more context to Liz's question for us. Thank you.
So for vibration purposes, buildings inside the zone of influence definitely have noise and vibration monitoring, right? There are additional vibration points that are taken up by the geotechnical team and are also being used. Any building that is outside the zone of influence, any type of vibration will be picked up by vibration monitoring devices that are in between those buildings and the construction area before those vibrations come to that building. So we will have advanced notice of that. And again, this is real time. And I also understood in the question, the person asking the question is, independent of the feature of work, noise, the zone of influence changes. And just to be clear, those devices are meant to be mobile and will be mobile. That is the purpose of those devices, to be moved around as needed as the different types of works are undertaken.
Thank you so much for that response, Francisco. Liz, I hope that answers your question. I see Doug has his hand raised. Doug, I'm going to unmute your microphone. I'm going to allow your microphone rather, and you have to unmute yourself. And please go ahead and ask your question.
Speaking of vibrations, that sort of noise, across the street from Osgoode would be the Ballet Opera Hall. The Opera Hall. Mm-hmm. Does the when a performance is happening, does do you lessen the work? Or is there no impact on the hall?
Thank you for your question, Doug. That's a great question, and I'm just going to I can answer that actually. So throughout construction and the early works, we have a very close relationship with the folks at the Four Seasons Center of Performing Arts. And there have been times where we have paused work in order for folks to carry on, whether it's events happening in other locations or at the Four Seasons. When the Four Seasons was built, it was built in such a way to withstand noise from outside. So whether it be fire trucks, construction, it could really be anything. And the soundproofing that this building has is incredible. So to answer your question, yes, we have in the past paused, and there will be, again, active noise monitoring so that we don't interrupt any performances that are happening at the Opera House. Again, we have a very close relationship. We speak to them all the time, and they are very aware of the details of the construction happening. They're also a part of our construction liaison committee. That's a very good question. I'd like to go to Slido and see some of the questions we've had from Slido. And I've printed one out here, and the question, it had the most votes, upvotes saying, how many trucks can we expect on the road during piling process? Juan, can you answer that for us?
Sure, Ross. Thank you. It's a very good question. So more or less, depending on the production, obviously, the more piles you do per day, the more soil you need to take away and the more concrete you need to bring in. But looking at our expected production, I would say that the maximum we'll need is around 7 concrete trucks a day and 5 McAway trucks. So that would be a maximum of 12 trucks per day. And this is not this is a max. So an average would be lower than that because you never reach your max production rates every day. So,
Hey, thank you so much for that response, Juan. And I'm gonna give us one more question from Slido. So stay on camera for us because I think you can help out. The question is, why are we working on the south site first? And why are we waiting until July to begin work on the north site? This person asks.
yeah, so on that, it's part of the construction sequence. At the end, we have an overall schedule as OTG for the delivery of the Ontario Line project as such, and we decide when we start one or another site to better use our resources. So it's a matter of sequence.
All right, thank you for that, Juan. I'm going to go into the chat here. I see somebody has added a question in the chat. Which agency or municipal provincial authority is responsible for enforcing the vibration noise monitoring is compliant or debris and filth cleanup that typically accompany construction projects of this magnitude? I see this question is twofold. So the first part of this question here is asking what kind of oversight there is to enforce we are compliant with noise and vibration monitoring and debris cleanup. And then the second part of this question is, as well are residents in these zones of influence having site conditions recorded prior to the start of piling work? And what recourse will residents have if vibrations cause internal damages to our properties? I see 3 questions here, actually. I'm going to ask my friend James Francis to come on camera and help me out with some of these questions here. James, the first question here is, how are we, who's enforcing these vibration compliances and the cleanup that accompany construction projects of this magnitude?
Great, it's a great question. So there are a few different players in this space. So maybe starting with vibration, because I know we've been getting some questions on that. So we have our contractor look at that. We have technical advisors internally who look and review. And we also have experts at the city who look at safer piling, impacts of piling, and sign off on a zone of influence and our approach to monitoring that. So there's that. We also have, in an overarching perspective for noise and vibration, Ministry of the Environment is the lead regulator on that front. So they are, they've been involved in this project from very early days, the environmental assessment phase. And for folks who've been part of this conversation since back in, say, 2020, we've been looking at noise and vibration impacts and mitigation and monitoring, including anticipated zones of influence from our construction work and our approaches to monitoring that, and MECP, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, was the reviewer for noise and vibration work and concurred with the assessment there. And Ministry of the Environment also looks at overall environmental impacts throughout construction. So that's a piece where if we are having say challenges with keeping clean sites, and clean sites are something that we that we work very hard to maintain. And so we have a team of folks on our contractor team. We have another team who goes out and checks the sites, as well as our internal Metrolinx environmental team, who are out there monitoring site conditions, noting if there are any things to clean up. We take that very seriously and work to action quickly. If there are any issues that would say catch the regulator's attention, the regulator is the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for overall site issues there as well.
Great, thanks, James. And to the other question in this chat here, they ask what recourse residents will have if damages is caused to properties. And you would send that information to the Ontario line, or rather Ontario line at metrolinx.com, and we'll connect you with our claims department and make sure everything is sorted out and you're taken care of. So please send us that information if there are damages, and we'll speak with you about that. I'm going to go back to folks who have their hands raised, and I see we have one here, and I really apologize if I mispronounce your name, but Raman, I'm going to allow your microphone. Mostafizur Raman, do you have a question? Okay, perhaps we'll come back to you. I see somebody who's says C. Do you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Perfect. Curious about the hours of operation for those living at 215 Queen Street West, which is right next to CIBC. Noise level, definitely dust level for sure, to the enjoyment of the balcony and the barbecue use. What hours are expected to be for work, and does that include weekends?
Hey, thank you so much for your question. That's a great question. And the question is, what are the work hours? This is the 215 Queen Street West, which I believe is the Smart House building. And what are the hours for piling? I may ask Juan, perhaps, to speak to this. And Juan, maybe we can talk a little bit more about what's happening after we finish piling and how we are building the acoustic shelter. So Juan, if you can come on camera and help us out with this.
Sure, Ross. Thank you. Yes, so I think there was a slide saying that the works in the South Shaft are anticipated to be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So day shift Monday to Friday. We'll eventually we may need to work on a weekend, but it's not the plan. So normally it wouldn't happen. Then once we finish the piling, so to try to minimize the impact on residents, we'll be erecting what we call an acoustic shed, that it's essentially a building or an enclosure, typically like an industrial building, to do all the work inside, and therefore do not have further impact on dust or noise to the residents. So that's the plan.
All right. Thank you so much for that answer, Juan.
If I could just add to that in terms of hours of work and concerns around potential disturbance with that, and also to the previous question, I realize I should have added, if there are any concerns that folks are noticing on site, as I said, we do take pride in working as best we can to manage those. But if you do notice anything, please do let us know. So feel free to send us an email, or even better, we have a 24-hour phone line. I believe that's in the slide deck, but it's 416-202-5100, and we're happy to receive calls, happy to receive emails, and we will get out there and rectify the situation. So realize I neglected to mention that, so just wanted to add that in.
That's a great reminder. Thank you, James. I'm going to go to folks who have their hands raised once again. I'm going to try Mostafizur. Are you able to unmute your microphone, Raman? No? Okay.
Ross, I think you're on mute there.
I apologize. I was saying I'm going to go to Slido, and the question is, why are they using a very modern structure for this station? It's right in front of a historical building built in 1829 and finished in 1832. This is the North Station we're referring to, the North Station entrance. The wrought iron fence is gorgeous. Couldn't come up with something else for a design. James, can you speak to the heritage aspect and the question here that I just read about the history?
Yeah, for sure. So we do, as I mentioned, in the presentation, we do at Metrolinx really appreciate the heritage context in which the future station entrances are being planned and constructed. And I think we're very lucky to be able to repurpose the building at 205 Queen Street West as the South Station entrance. The North Station site, as mentioned in the question, absolutely, it's adjacent to a provincially significant heritage property, Osgoode Hall, nationally recognized, municipally recognized from a heritage perspective, and we've been following a very in-depth heritage approach for the past several years in planning our station at this location, given the heritage context, and given the heritage significance of Osgoode Hall, Metrolinx, we worked to seek approval from the provincial heritage minister for our construction needs of that Northeast Station entrance. And we did receive the consent from the minister with several conditions. If folks are interested in what they are available on our website. They were provided as part of our environmental assessment report for Ontario Line. Those conditions require Metrolinx to design a minimally intrusive station building on that northeast corner, and they get rather specific. And so our conditions include the use of a flat roof, of glass, using the smallest footprint that we can, and that's to reduce impacts to views, recognizing the tremendous views that there are available of the building and of the heritage fence. And we're also required, as part of that minister's consent, to have a design that's distinguishable from the building from the 1800s, but that is also compatible with it, using glass and a flat roof. And so the modern or the contemporary design that we have been showing in our renderings, it's a concept, is really meant to meet those conditions and to be minimally intrusive on the adjacent heritage fabric. And I couldn't agree more that that building and the adjacent iron fence are I think they're lovely, they're beautiful, and hoping that with the design of the Ontario Line station that we're able to have the many passengers who are boarding or exiting at the station have opportunities to really appreciate the adjacent heritage context.
Thanks so much for that detailed answer.
Sir, I have another question, sir.
Oh.
Thank you, sir. Sir, please apologize me. I have another question, please, sir. Sir, will you install any automatic door which is adjusted with the train? Because an unauthorized person go into the main track, and the people are suffering.
I'm sorry, Jeff. What was the question? I'm sorry, it wasn't Jeff. This was Raman.
Yes, sir. My question is that will you install automatic door which is adjusted with the train vehicle? Because many times unauthorized person go into the main track, and the trips will be at that time trips cannot operate. So can you tell me, will you install the automatic door which is adjusted with the train? When train will come, automatic door will be open.
Hey, thank you for your question. I'm not able to clearly hear you. If you're able to include your question in the chat. If not, James, were you able to pick up on some of the question that was just asked?
Yes, absolutely. It came through clearly on my end. So thank you for the question around having what we call platform edge doors or platform screen doors on the station, and we absolutely will be including those at all of the Ontario Line stations. The trains will be fully automated and able to have a very high degree of precision in terms of where exactly they stop on the platform every time at each station, and so that enables use of platform screen doors. So for folks who are say waiting at station level, and I think we might have a rendering in this deck that we might be able to show to illustrate this potentially. Folks waiting at at platform level, there will be transparent screens along the edge of the platform, so that it's not possible to to inadvertently end up at track level. So there's that level of safety and level of protection that's embedded in the design here and at every station, so that the doors to the trains will open when the train's in the station and properly aligned with the doors. So one of the features available with a contemporary transit system, and something that we're very happy to offer for Ontario Line.
Hey, thank you so much for that answer, James. And now I'm going to give an opportunity to Jeff Kilpatrick. I've allowed your mic. Please ask your question, Jeff. Jeff, can you are you able to hear me? Can you ask your question? Jeff, try to unmute your mic if you can't.
There we go. There we go.
Hi, Jeff.
Okay. So
right.
I have kind of a question. I have a question and a kind of question. So the question is, and this may have been answered while I had to take a phone call for business. What's the fare range going to be going from line to line to line when you actually have to leave the subway? I'm assuming you'll just transfer within subway stations. Was that discussed? If it was, I'll just watch the video later on.
Hey, that's a really good question, Jeff. And perhaps I can answer. It's going to be integrated into the one fare system, so you'll be able to transfer between different transit options. But perhaps James is best to speak to this one.
Oh, Ross, I absolutely agree. So thinking about, say, a transfer at Osgoode Station, seamless transfer, it would just be simply transferring between lines. So similar to a transfer today at St. George Station or Shepherd and Yonge stations, just to transfer between lines. So all one fare, and that fare integration approach. Ross mentioned one fare, and we're very happy to have that. The kind of inter-system transfers, and Ontario Line does interchange with the GO system at several locations, and their riders would also benefit from an integrated fare structure.
Okay, so here's a possible scenario I envision. So I enter a TTC station, and I go to the Ontario Line, and then I end up at the Eglinton Crosstown. How, from a practical standpoint, how does that work?
Right. So in terms of fare structure, it would be a single fare. So that if you start on Ontario Line and were to go directly to Crosstown, or were to change to Line 1 and get on Crosstown from there, that it would be a single fare to access the overall system.
Okay, so the 2-hour window that Metrolinx that exists on Presto in the TTC is a TTC standard, not a Presto standard within. I mean, what I'm trying to get at is, if I stay on the TTC, and I have a 2-hour window, does that exist if I go from TTC to the Ontario Line, and then go from the Ontario Line to someplace else? If I exceed, is that 2-hour window functionally in place, or is it literally I get on the TTC, I get on the Ontario Line, and when I get off, the whole thing resets itself? And if I was still within my 2 hours, do I come back at no additional transfer cost, or with a free transfer, or am I hit again for another transport fee?
So I said the vision is that it would be the same benefits you have today with the in terms of fares. So this would be you know, an enhanced system with the vision of the same type of fare regime today in terms of transfers and the 2 hour window.
Great. Thank you so much, James. And I'm just looking at the clock right now. In the interest of time, I think we have time to take one more question. And I see Liz Driver's hands up. So Liz, I've allowed your mic. Please ask your question.
Sure. I have 3 questions, but I could save some of them for a meeting that I hope to have with you after this meeting. So I have 2 that I'd like to bring to people's attention. One is that there is a different vibration threshold for heritage buildings and new buildings. So question number 1 is, can you confirm that you'll be using the heritage threshold when you've got your so-called intermediate vibration monitor there, because you are surrounded by heritage buildings? I also, and thank you for putting up that slide. I don't believe my first question was answered, and it was about the changing zones of influence. How can the community know when these zones of influence have changed and what they've changed to? Because we need to keep our eye on what is happening there, right? And this is the zones of influence that you're showing are absolutely contrary to all the information that Metrolinx has provided in the past.
So, Liz, I just want to recap what your 2 questions were. The second was, how will the community know when the zone of influence changes?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
The first one is, how are we taking into account old heritage buildings versus new builds?
No, because you explained that that you don't need a vibration monitor everywhere, because you're going to have vibration monitors sort of intermediate. You've got your site, and then you're going to have monitors. So if those monitors pick up some sort of vibration that's a worry, then you'll for buildings beyond that. So my point is, there's different thresholds for new buildings and heritage buildings. Will you set the threshold for your sort of intermediate monitoring device at the heritage threshold? And by the way, that threshold varies, right? There's different methods of measuring heritage vibration that's dangerous for heritage buildings. You can't set your monitor at a vibration level for a modern building when you're surrounded by heritage buildings.
All right. Thank you so much for those questions, Liz. And we're just going to recap here. So the first question was, how we'll adjust those monitors based on different thresholds for heritage buildings, and perhaps we can speak to the environmental assessment report that was conducted, James. And then the second question we have here, I'll ask Francisco to answer, about the zone of influence, how the community will know, unless James is able to answer the 2 of those questions. But I hand it over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Liz. And these are great questions. So in terms of zone of influence, we are certainly aware of the different thresholds for heritage structures, and that those limits vary by frequency as well. And so, you know, the lower frequency vibrations have tighter thresholds. And so in terms of the monitoring approach, absolutely working with our contractors on making sure that they are monitoring so that their activities can be adapted as needed, and B, that there is no risk to the heritage structures in the area. You know, we're certainly aware we have Osgoode Hall, we have the Bank of Canada building, we have the CIBC facade being retained in place adjacent to the south site. We have Campbell House. There's quite a large number. And in terms of zone of influence, we do also know that this will be updated through construction. So we have various phases of surface construction and then also tunneling. And we'll be looking at, where could vibrations approach those thresholds for us to be monitoring and adjusting the monitoring locations accordingly. And just Ross, you mentioned the environmental assessment, and so I'll just key on that for a moment. We did also do zone of influence calculations as part of that environmental assessment before OTG was on board, before the construction means and methods and specific equipment and activities were confirmed. And in that environmental assessment, we looked at the zone of influence for heritage structures and also for non-heritage structures, and very aware that the zone is different for heritage structures, and that it's more sensitive, has a lower threshold, and that working closely with OTG here as they develop their monitoring program with all of that in mind.
Hey, thanks for that, James. And I know we're past time, but we did start a little bit late, so perhaps I'll give another minute for Jeff to ask a question. Jeff, I've allowed your microphone.
Okay, good. So this was my second question for originally, and it's kind of a quasi question, but I'm noticing that there is a section of the Danforth just east of Pape on the north side, where it started out because one of my favorite bakeries that I've been going to for like 30 years, all of a sudden is closed. And I was able to contact them because they have a bigger facility someplace. And I don't want to mention the name, but they told me that they were forced out, they were forced to close, and they were offered what they said what they considered to be a less than optimal amount of money in exchange for their property. And I guess my question, Mike, I don't know if it's much of a question, but I mean, this has an impact. I mean, this is what makes a little neighborhood like this a little neighborhood like this. And to come in and take a swath of a whole block and just decimate it when you're taking such care with like the CIBC building. And I know these buildings, these storefronts were probably not heritage buildings. They probably had no status and probably would never even qualify or have status because they're not old landmark buildings, but they are part of that active community. And now they're gone. So I don't, what's the mechanism for assessing places and who gets to decide who survives and who doesn't? Because that's what it looks like. Somebody may.
Sorry, Jeff, we lost you there for a sec. Are you unable to be? Sorry about that. Are you unable to?
There we go. There we go. No,
right,
I'm back. I'm back. I don't know what happened. So anyway, my point is that so I just guess I'm saying what other areas are just going to be somebody's going to make a unilateral decision that, well, this half a block of space is just going to be gone forever. And there is a station at Pape. I mean, did somebody not look to see? Could this have been done in the same footprint that the Pape station is done? I mean, it's not you're not trying to connect multiple major lines there. So my question was like, how was this decided? And it just looked like it was, and when I contacted the company, they just kind of told me it was they were just like informed. You will be out of business and shut down on this date.
Okay, thank you so much for that question, Jeff. And it certainly isn't our intention to, decimate a community. And, we do understand how important these small businesses are to community members. James, perhaps you could speak to this question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd start by saying, we've worked extensively. We've gone to great lengths to minimize impacts for project construction, at every site. And there are impacts when building a project this way, or building a project like this. I mean, through the downtown core. I live not very far from Pape and Danforth, so I'm quite familiar with the area. That's also an interchange station, so we're interchanging Ontario Line with Line 2 at Pape. And wherever we do have impacts for our project needs, we work very closely with businesses and with property owners to mitigate those impacts. And we work to continue to engage with them and to it's been an ongoing effort to minimize impacts across the line, at Osgoode and also at our Pape and Danforth interchange.
Thank you so much for that, James. And folks, I know we're running a bit late on times, and I promised that my role here tonight was to keep us all on time. So I don't want to fail you, and I'm going to ask Allison to take us to our community engagement slides. Allison, I believe it's slide 30. Just want to talk a little bit about how you can all stay in touch with us. Next slide, please. Perfect. So yeah, there's a lot of engaging conversations happening tonight, lots of questions, and we encourage those questions. We love to have that dialogue with you. So I mentioned earlier, tonight's not the only opportunity for you to ask these questions. You can contact us through the Ontario line at metrolinx.com, or directly, as James had mentioned earlier, we have a 24/7 number here. It's just on the left of the screen, and please register for our newsletter. You can use your phone and scan the QR code you see on your screen, or you can manually go into the website and type in your email. We also have different social media accounts that are monitored and used consistently. And again, we encourage you to ask your questions and to follow, because we want to give you the information that you desire. Next slide, please. Hey, thank you all so much for coming to our information session tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you a good and safe evening. Thank you all.